What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. Today is going to be pseudo day number 3 working on the 4-banger to 5.0 swap project here. It is Sunday. The weather is tolerable. I really don't like these overcast, cloudy, rain drizzly days. Like, they're just so depressing to me. But anyways, hopefully the sun peeks out. It is supposed to. You can kind of see it almost looks like a sunset out in the distance, and like it's not even noon. Anyways, today we're going to be focusing on just a few little things, and almost kind of the worst part of the swap in reality is honestly doing the pedal assembly. So if you're fortunate enough to already have a 5-speed 4-cylinder car that you're swapping, then you're already ahead of the game. Taking out 5-speed pedal assemblies and swapping them over can be a little tedious. Now, I've mentioned this in some of my other videos. In fact, Project Come and Take It, I had to do the same thing. So we're going to be playing down underneath in here, be dropping down the steering column, getting that out of the way. We've already actually got some of this removed in here. In fact, the dash frame's not even fully bolted in, and God knows, you can just see like there's wires and crap everywhere. But part of the initial part of this process is to take the underside of the steering column cover off here, and then we'll get access to the bolts that hold the pedal assembly on, and we're gonna have to disconnect the brake booster underneath the hood here. Other things that we'll take out is like this guy right here. This is important because we're gonna need that for the other car, and that'll pretty much do it for the interior of this car. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that the gauge cluster is going to have to be swapped in the 4-cylinder car. We need a 7,000 RPM tach as opposed to a 4-cylinder one that's only 6,000 RPM. So we'll be getting into that later. We won't be using this one because this one's pre-90. We need a cluster or components out of a cluster that are from 90 to 93 that'll line up with this car. So that's pretty much where we are, guys. Going to dig into things here. So let's get at it. All right, so basic tools, what we need here, 5/16 will get off a lot of the under panel screws in your steering column area to get those off. Phillips screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, 13 millimeter, 14 millimeter, and a really long extension if you have one, or a bunch of extensions, because amazingly enough, you can get to those bolts down at the firewall there with really long extension and not necessarily having to rip the whole dash out. If we have to pull the dash, then we pull the dash, but I don't think that that's necessary. If you guys do need to do your heater core or the evaporator or anything else, then yeah, maybe you want to pull the dash and get all that stuff done. Now, I'm really hope, fingers crossed, the heater core is good in this car, and the evaporator is good because the system still had a charge when I disconnected the lines. So anyways, guys, gonna get in here, get involved. It's gonna be hard to see everything, so we'll just kind of time lapse it, but you get a really good idea of what we're working with in order to get the pedal assembly out here. And this car is pieced together. Absolutely pieced together. All right, guys, so now what we want to do is we'll disconnect the brake switch. Pulls off just like that. There's probably a neutral safety switch if they even have it hooked up. Looks like they do. Those wires pulled off, no problem. Get some light on the situation. So there's a little pin on the brake pedal assembly, so you want to pull that off. And what that's going to allow you to do is disconnect the booster as it should. There we go. From the brake pedal. There we go. So now that's loose. Make sure you don't lose this bushing. Okay. Looks like we've got a billet clutch quadrant in here, which is cool, I guess. Essentially there's 4 nuts, and we're going to be using the super long extension to get all those out. One. Two. Three. Okay, guys, so now you're gonna want to unscrew. If your car's got cruise control, then you're gonna have this little vacuum switch, so you can unscrew it or just kind of pull it out. And now we need to pull this nut off the top here that's going up into the dash frame, which, there we go. Old 10mm. Gets you every time. Pop this guy, this bracket off. So now once that is out of the way, nothing should be holding the pedal assembly. And we pull and maneuver it out of here. Now can take this out. Oh. So here's our clutch cable. We'll be pulling that out. For my final trick, we're going to remove the throttle pedal, because the 5.0 or the 5-speed cars actually have a different style pedal. All right, so we're underneath the hood here, and ultimately the pedal assembly bolts to the brake booster, and that, once it's all unbolted, will allow the brake booster to come out. Now I am going to loosen off these bolts that are on the master for now, just so that way they're done and I don't have to worry about them. Same thing, can be a little tedious to get in there. Long extension will go a long way to help you get those out. And we are going to be needing these lines. So when we put a new 5.0 booster in that other car, these lines are actually shorter and they're more oriented over here, because the 4-cylinder master is positioned back here. These lines go from over here down there. The other line that we're going to be changing is going to be this guy going to the driver's side caliper, because same idea. It's actually got a longer run on it, and you could bend and stretch this out if you wanted to, but honestly it's just easier to replace that line. Just pass your socket through the lines here. All right, so now we need our clutch cable, which this is usually a 1/4 inch bolt. Someone has run a screw through it, which is fine, as long as it's held in place. Here's our clutch cable. We'll remove the cruise control component of it. It can stay in the car. There you go. Okay. It's bigger. So if you guys don't luck out so easily spinning these off like this, maybe you got a little bit more rust or corrosion, then you know, you can heat them up with a little mini torch or spray them. All right guys, so you might be wondering, okay, well, why did I disconnect the master off the booster here? Well, so for my new booster, I got to give a core, so you can see how nasty this one looks. So I'm just going to knock the master off here, and I'll be able to take this back and get my core charge back. All right guys, so here's our mess. Here's all our goods. We got our throttle cable. We have our proper 5-speed throttle pedal. Now, you don't need to change this, but if you want it to look the part, because the automatic pedal is skinnier, you'll see it when we pull it out of the other car. We have our 5-speed pedal assembly. Looks like we have a billet quadrant with 3 different levels to select from, and we have our clutch cable, which seems like it's a newer cable, so all is good there. So here's all the main components that we need for our 5-speed swap. All right, so let's do a little time check here. 12:37, so we're at 30 minutes and we got all of this out, which really isn't that bad. So now we get to do it all again in the in the white car. So it's going to be pretty much the exact same process, guys. Just keep in mind, pulling the steering column is going to make your life that much easier. So make sure you do it. And you can either disconnect the bolt on where the main shaft goes down towards the rack. So this is where it bolts into the shaft, right? So you can either undo this bolt, or if you leave that bolt in and you tug at the column, you're actually just going to pull this shaft out of the column section here, so you'll end up with this on the inside of the car, which isn't really a big deal, but it's up to you. If you don't undo this one, you're probably going to be wrestling things a little bit more, although sometimes you can undo this and you might have to spray some PB blaster or some sort of lubricant, because sometimes this doesn't always want to come out either. So keep that in mind. We'll go over now and do the white car, hopefully get this pedal assembly in. And we also need to take the gauge cluster out, because like I said, we got to do the tack swap in that one. So we have the proper tack. I need to make sure that I have a tack, I actually have a tack laying around. Anyways, let's get to it and carry on. All right, back to our 4-banger. So as I mentioned before, pretty much the same, although we're going to be a little bit more involved in this car. In this car, we need to get the cluster out, which means we need to take this bezel off, which I got a couple Torx screws on the top side here. Once you get this lower panel off, there's a couple on the underside. You need to take the steering wheel column cover off. So all of that's going to come out, then that'll expose our gauge cluster. And this car, actually, we need to take the center console out as well, so we can change the plate, and we'll see if we have to do trimming for the 5-speed transmission or not. But ultimately we need access to the transmission tunnel, so center console is going to end up coming out as well, which again really isn't that big a deal. A couple Phillips screws. Armrest comes out with some 5/16 bolts that are hiding underneath these little guys, so you gotta pop those out on either side. So that's it. You guys have seen me strip a million interiors out before, but just trying to give you guys, first timers that are watching, a little bit of context on what needs to happen. So anyways, let me get this going here and see how fast we can get it done. So there we go, guys. We got 3 pedals down here now and got all our holes lined up. So when we get our new brake booster, we'll be able to pass that through and bolt it back on. Now, the next step is we actually need to pull this speedo cable out. So we actually need to pull it out of here. So you pop this grommet out and we're gonna feed it through here. So as mentioned in one of my other videos, for whatever reason, all automatic cars, they passed the speedometer cable through the clutch cable hole. There's a little hole where the 1/4-inch bolt or the screw or whatever you're going to use goes to hold that guy in. So anyways, we're going to pop this grommet out, and pass the cable through there, and then we'll put our clutch cable in through there, and we're pretty much going to have what we need done in the bay here, except for that booster. Rocking along pretty good over here, and started putting some stuff back into the bay. Got the wiper motor in there, washer fluid line hooked back up, the starter solenoid is in place, and brake lines across the back side of the firewall there. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and run this main harness that I've cleaned up and taped, and might as well just get that passed through the passenger side of the firewall in that back corner there, and start getting some of our wires run, because, well, why not? As soon as that booster goes in there, I still gotta pass the steering column back through, but other than that, we're getting pretty close to being able to set this motor into the engine bay here. All right, so remember this brown connector I was talking about? Well, this brown connector is plug and play now. Being a 92, 93 harness, that connector will plug into this connector here, which goes into, call it the old age body control module. So what that's going to allow everything to do is let all the gauges in the cluster work, make the key work, to activate the ECU, turn on the fuel pumps, all that other good stuff. So that is why this harness is so critical. Now, all we really have to do, got to get our coil set up here. This is for the AC, and that guy goes to ground. What's up, guys? So the rain has come, the battery died in the GoPro, so I was rushing to get all my tools inside and get any of the parts that were sitting outside, inside of the car, to keep them safe. And I've got the gauge cluster inside here, and I've actually got another 140 speedo cluster sitting right here. And I don't remember 100%. I had this note on here that said bad oil gauge, but that's what I was told, I think. And 9 times out of 10, it's not the gauge that's bad, it's usually the sending unit. So this cluster might actually be fine. It's only got 81,000 on the odometer. This one's 76,000 that came out of the car. So we're pretty close here. So might just swap this guy in, and I'll try my luck. I'll see which crystal is in better shape. So we'll get that plugged in loosely, and we'll see how everything works when we fire up the car. Hopefully all the gauges are good, and I'll show you guys, obviously, when we go back out, how things are going in terms of on the underside of the hood. I'm really happy with the progress that I made today to get the pedal assembly out and reinstalled in that car, getting the clutch cable installed, getting the speedo cable rerouted, getting the throttle cable in there, getting the wiring harness in, starter solenoid coil, batteries sitting in there. So in reality, should actually be able to hit the key and the fuel pump should turn on. It obviously squirt gas out of the fuel line, but the proof of concept should be there. So I had, what, 6.5 hours into my first day, full 8 hours into my second day, got 4 hours into today. So we're sitting at 18.5-ish hours, which really isn't that bad. Now, what I need to do now is get the engine off the stand here get the flywheel. I'll put the engine plate on, bolt the flywheel on, bolt the clutch on, pressure wash this transmission up real quick. Might actually try and get that in the car first. Might be easier just to bolt on the cross member. We'll fill up the transmission with fluid before we put it in, because it's going to be easier to do it that way. So maybe we'll get that in the car, and like I said, get the clutch and everything bolted on. That guy, it'll probably be, we are in a position to bolt that thing in. Then we can get the radiator back in there, finish up some of the wiring, plug in the connectors, all that other good stuff. Probably have to fill it up with oil. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And guys, that's pretty much it in terms of being able to fire it up. So I know this is going to bleed into 4 days, just with doing that whole engine bay, painting that up, because that did take a significant amount of time. But I think we're doing pretty good overall. So hang in there. And yeah, this won't be, I'm not going to finish this video now. We're going to keep going, because I'll finish it at the end of what day 3 would be from an hour perspective. So there we go. Hang in. So I do have to say, I really enjoy using these straps to lift motors up or to set them down into cars, whatever it might be. They're rated at 6,400 pounds. I think it was like a 2-pack from Harbor Freight for 10, 15 bucks. Don't quote me on that, but very inexpensive. And they're great because you don't have to worry about chain rubbing against your valve covers or any of those things. And they're pretty versatile in terms of how you want to loop them around exhaust manifolds or whatever it might be that you want to do. So there's just a preference of mine, whether you guys want to try it out for yourselves. Just going through all the nuts and bolts and making sure that I have everything that I need to bolt this thing together, because it came to me in pieces. So the original motor that was in the car, something happened to it, so they sent the motor off to get rebuilt, which is why everything is nice and shiny and new. But there was a lot of other parts that they had recently replaced, like a new starter. The clutch and the flywheel looked pretty good. It wasn't coated with anything, so there was a little bit of surface rust on there, so I just kind of hit it with a Scotch pad. Depending on how bad it is, if you guys have some really bad pits, then you might want to just buy a new flywheel. You can try getting it resurfaced, but for the resurfacing cost, you can pretty much almost buy a new one from Rock Auto. So keep that in mind. This one wasn't bad. WD-40, some steel wool. If that doesn't work, then yeah, go and get yourself another one. This one cleaned up fine just with a purple Scotch pad, and I just used a little bit of super clean on there. Everything was good. I loaned my clutch alignment tool to a friend of mine, so I just literally stuck the input shaft of the transmission right in there, so make sure that the clutch disc is aligned properly so we don't fight things when the time comes. And you know what? I'm just missing one bolt for the bell housing, this guy right here. I've got everything else for the transmission mount and, you know, two little bolts for the engine plate that'll go on once everything's installed. So I'm debating right now whether I want to actually bolt the bell housing and the starter on now and put the transmission up in the car from the underside, or do I want to bolt this stuff together, put this in the car, and then try and mate the motor to it. Transmission really isn't that heavy, so I could probably wrestle it underneath the car without too many issues, which in fact I think I'm going to do that. Just this way I can actually get more bolted on the motor now by having the bell housing on there. I'll make sure that obviously the clutch fork and the throwout bearing, all that good stuff is in proper position. And I think that's going to be the plan of attack. That way it's more is done, and then it's just the 4 bolts for the transmission. And we'll throw our drive shaft in the back, obviously fill up our transmission with fluid, and we'll be good to go.